Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host today, Matt Filipovitz, and we are here talking specialists. And joining me is my phenomenal co-host, Mr. Bill DeFilippo. Bill, hello, how are you?
I'm doing okay, Matt. People are going to be listening to this probably after the safety podcast, and I think it's important everyone knows that we're doing this an hour and a half after we did the safety podcast, and in that hour and a half, nothing's changed. It's still exactly the same. How are you, Matt?
I had dinner. I made dinner, which was good. I thought about doing laundry, but then I didn't. So, really, not much to report on my end. Not a
There
whole
we
lot
go.
has changed. Unlike Bill, the Penn State Specialist Unit, which is undergoing a sea of change as we head into 2023. But before we dive in there, be sure to check out. We have, I think, every single position previewed now. We're ending it on specialists. So we have, what is that going to be? 9 podcasts for you to go back, get fully up to date on the Nittany Lions, covering every single position unit. And we are going to end it today, which will be Friday. I believe today is August 18th. Don't quote me on that. Friday, August 18th, to talk Penn State specialists. This group last year was very upperclassmen heavy. We'll start up front with Chris Stoll. Chris Stoll was the Manley Award winner for the best long snapper in the country. He sadly did not get drafted in the NFL draft, but he has signed with the Seattle Seahawks as an undrafted free agent. And he snapped the ball most of the time back to Barney Moore, who, after a little bit of a unique career. Started out at Colgate, came to Penn State, redshirted it, and took advantage of the COVID year. He finished the year with 55 punts with an average just over 44 yards. Also pinned 22 of those punts inside the 20. Also punting in that room was Alex Bacchetta as a true freshman. They secured the red shirt, but he still was able to play in 3 games, punted 3 times for 41 yards, and 2 of the 3 were down inside the 20. In the kicking game, it was Jake Pinniger led the way. Feels like he had a better season than I remember looking back on the stats. Regardless, he leaves Penn State as the program's second all-time leading scorer. Excuse me. Just a phenomenal career that I think really went under the radar. But he finished the year field goal wise 12 of 16 with a long of 50. And Sanders Sahadak, who was a redshirt freshman last year, went 1 of 2 on his field goal attempts, with his one connection coming from 20 yards out. Bill, the specialist group, I think, started really strong last year, maybe faded a little bit towards the end. What was your assessment of this room last year?
Yeah, Amore is kind of the guy who I would say fits that bill. Had a good
Mm-hmm.
start to the season. Seemed like a bit of a revelation at punter, but as as the year went on, wasn't able to boom him like he was earlier in the year, which it's fine. Like by uh, he still had a good year for a guy who, like you mentioned, had a really interesting path to Happy Valley. I went back and I looked at Jake Pinniger. Made all but 2 extra points
Yep.
that he attempted. One was against Ohio, one was against Central Michigan. He missed 4 field
Good
goals on the
opponents to miss
year.
against.
Yeah, well, to that end, 2 of his 4 missed field goals were against Ohio and Central Michigan as well. One against Ohio, one against Central Michigan, and then he missed both of his field goals at the end of the year in a really nasty game against Michigan State. And then in between that, he was perfect on field goals from the start of October until the final game of the regular season. So when it came to guys who kicked the football, Penn State ended up having a pair of guys who had interesting careers for different reasons, like you mentioned. Uh, Barney Moore came to Penn State after being at Colgate. Pinniger, just God, such an up and down, such a long career. One of those guys who kind of lost the trust of Penn State fans, but ended up winning it back, I think, a bit during his final year. Then in the return game, they didn't really do much returning punts, which
No.
that's just a hard thing to quantify in general.
Yeah.
And we're very good on kickoff returns because it turns out when you give Nick Singleton the football on a 20-yard head start, good things tend to happen. So I think it was general. And then, like you mentioned, Chris Stoll was the best long snapper in America. So this is a weird year for Penn State special teams because last year it was just such a consistent, reliable. We never had to think all that much about Penn State special teams, never were too terribly worried about Penn State special teams.
Mhm.
And that leads into a year now where it's the single biggest question mark in the entire roster.
Yeah, and I guess we can kind of dive right in, Bill. Do you want to talk? Let's talk long snapper first. I think neither you or I are long snapping um, savants. We're not experts, but it sounds like it's going to be Tyler Dozansky, who is actually an Chicago suburbs kid. So that's pretty cool. Very rarely does a kid from this area go off to Penn State, which is always cool to see. Seems like he's the guy who's going to take over. It's going to be his third year in the program. Again, Chris Stoll was here forever. A redshirt guy and a COVID year take advantage guy. So he was here forever. So now it goes to Tyler Dozansky. Pretty open and shut case, I think, there. Bill, do you want to start punting or kicking? What are you more nervous about, I guess, is a good way to quantify this.
Easily place kicking. I mean, the thing with punting is that Penn State's defense can single-handedly overcome bad punts. And,
It's a good point.
yes, I understand the risk associated with it, but Penn State's has a good enough defense that it can overcome bad punts. I don't know if the thing with place kicking is that if you leave points on the field, at least it gets you something. And I don't know, or we have not seen yet, rather, Penn State's place kicking be able to show it has the ability to just go out there and get you something. And I think that's a really big concern.
Yeah, so like we mentioned, returning to this room is Sanders Sahadak, a Lehigh Valley native, which we love to see. But he, as I said, went 1 for 2 last year. His lone make from 20 yards, his miss was from like 50 plus. He is just a big-legged lefty. He can really boot the hell out of the ball. That's always been his strength.
And one thing that I think is worth mentioning with Sahadak, sorry to cut you off like this, but one thing I think is worth mentioning is that 24/7 had him as the best kicker in his recruiting class back in 2021. Cole's kicking, which is kind of the gold standard for kicker recruiting, had him as the number 8 kicker in the country, but had him as a 5-star based on their rating system.
Yeah, so definitely talent there, but I guess kind of to push him or just for some added security, they brought in Alex Felkins, who spent the past, I want to say 4 years, but 3 seasons, we'll call it, with him playing at Columbia in the Ivy League. Obviously, 2020 was canceled, but Felkins has been all Ivy League in 3 years. He was all Ivy League again last year, and he finished the year 11 of 16 on field goals with a long of 53. So pretty similar to what Penn State got out of Jake Pinniger. Bill, who do you think can win this job, will win this job, which is probably a better way to word that? Do you think they'll go with the guy who's proven he can do it at some level of college? Or do you think they'll go with the guy who can just boot the ball and hope that he spent the last 2 off seasons and 3 seasons learning how to become a more reliable kicker?
Well, I think it's also worth mentioning that they have a freshman walk-on named Ryan Barker.
That's true. Ryan Barker, yeah. That's true.
There's been a bit of reporting out of camp that he's done a nice job. But listen, it makes for bad podcasting, but the answer here is I don't know. I truly have no idea what Penn State is going to do here. Everything is going to come. I would say kicking is the one thing from practice that you can, with some level of confidence, bank on translating to get, at least in terms of the process, in terms of what a guy is capable of doing. If a guy is able to make if he has the leg to make a 50-yard field goal in practice, odds are that's not suddenly going away during the game. And it's all going to come down to who's able to be the most consistent guy during practice, who's going to be able to this and this and this. And I think the reason, I guess I'd go with Sahadak. Felkins in his college career, certainly a guy who knows what it is like to kick a football in college and college action, albeit at a much lower level than what Penn State's going to be competing at, but 64.3% in 2019, 66.7% in 2021, 68.8% in 2022 on a decent volume of kicks. So, I don't know, hopefully Sanders Sahadak's the guy. I mean, we will know early enough how I think we will be able to answer this question by the time the Illinois game rolls around.
Yep, I'm
But
agreeing.
I wouldn't be surprised if the first 3 games of the year are Sander and Al. Maybe Alex Falcons is the guy. What was it with Pinniger and Stout? Like 40 and in Pin,
I think
41
it
and
was
out
40.
Stout,
Yeah, it was
something
40,
like that.
40 something in was Pin, 40 out was out. And I'm glad you brought that up. I have a point I want to hit on,
Yeah,
but keep going.
yeah. I was going to say maybe they'd try and do something like that with Sahaydak and Falcons, but and we'll obviously add Ryan Barker into this, but this is one of those things where they will track every single kick. They have been tracking every single kick for years and for as long as they possibly can with these guys, and they're going to sit down and look at everything and make a decision, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah, them charting the kicks, Bill, is what I wanted to point out. They have both these guys are the red shirts are secured. They're gonna be using a year of eligibility no matter what. I think we're gonna see both. I think the fact that
Yeah,
one's a righty, one's a lefty, maybe makes a difference. I'm not a kicking expert. Who's to say? I'd imagine that you kick better from certain hashes depending on what leg you kick with. That just makes sense in my brain. But I think we're definitely going to see both. I think Falcons has a role. I think in high pressure situations, that's the guy that has been in that position. He's older, he's more experienced. I mean, the dude's clearly wildly intelligent. He has a degree from Columbia, and that's where I think there's a lot of value there. But if it's hey, we need a 60-yarder. They're about to go to halftime. We're already up 17 on I don't know Iowa. Like, go out there, say, hey, let's see what you can do. That's where I think we're really going to see both. It's just this is the one position that you're right, Bo. It translates the best from practice to the field, but at the same time, it doesn't because of the pressure being such a big
right.
part of this position. That mental aspect of kicking is unlike anything else, not just in football, but like in sports. It's like the equivalent of like shooting a free throw with like the game on the line. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
really is such a high pressure situation, and it's gonna be a while. I think before I don't think we're ever gonna feel settled about this position all year. I think there's gonna be some bad misses. I think there's gonna be some nice makes, and I think it's just gonna be on us to be measured about it and just go along for the ride. And do you think this is going to be something that we ever find comfort in this season?
Oh, I wish I had an answer to
Right.
that.
Yeah. It's an impossible question. Yeah, you're right.
I'd like it if I could say yes.
Okay. All right. Totally fair. And then we'll shift over real quick. We'll cover kickoffs. Kickoffs never really got settled. I don't think we fully understood what Jordan Stout was while we had him, or at least I didn't from the kickoff perspective, because that unit basically got a 3-year vacation because every kick was a touchback. It was wild.
Yeah.
Gabe Nwosu started the year as the kickoff guy. Jake Pinniger eventually won the job. Obviously, Pinniger has since moved on, and now it's Gabe Nwosu probably coming back into that role. The big thing for that unit for me is going to be coverage. Dom DeLuca was a revelation, in coverage, I think, for kickoff for me
Yeah.
last year. I called this out at the time, which is crazy that it was like a year ago at this point, but Dom DeLuca tackling Charlie Jones inside the 20 that first game against Purdue after the Kevon Lee touchdown may have been the play of the year that no one's going to remember. But unless I have anything to say about it. Because Charlie Jones was the reigning Big Ten returner of the year, and Dom DeLuca, a redshirt freshman on the road, made a big play. Like, there's talent in that coverage unit. Bill, do you think we can maybe see that unit shift a little bit back to what it was under Jordan Stout, or were you okay with them allowing a few more returnable balls just because they had to?
Well, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a matter of allowing returnable balls, right? It was that Stout was just able to put the ball into the fourth row of the stands, and like
Right.
you don't have too many kinds of like. I'm sure if it were up to them, they would do that every single time. But like, the one thing I'll give them on their return units is with how they use it as a way for guys to get opportunities. Obviously, like you have a guy like a Dom DeLuca in there who is able to use it as a springboard into getting more playing time. But you look
Mhm.
up and down the roster, and there are just a lot of really talented young dudes who seem like they could push for playing time. You got to figure out a place to get it for them, and
Mhm.
throwing them on the coverage units is a great way to do it. I think Stacey Collins has generally done a really good job with his coverage units. They've never looked like they're one guy getting wiped out away from allowing a huge return, and that's a big thing. So, like,
Yeah.
as long as, you're never going to have another Jordan Stout, or
No.
it's going to be hard to have another Jordan Stout. So as long as you can just have guys who know where to stand and, aren't going to be, aren't getting wiped out, and next thing you know, there's a 75-yard return for a touchdown against you.
Mhm.
I'm fine with it. Stacey Collins has kind of earned the benefit of the doubt with this group that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, and thankfully he does. He's been a really good special teams coordinator for a
Yeah.
very long time, and he has another decision to make, and that's going to be at punter. Like we mentioned, Alex Paqueta, I believe a 5-star by Cole's kicking measures as well, and came in last year, same school as Blake Gillikin down in Georgia, very highly regarded. Took the red shirt, which I think was really valuable. But again, he did appear in a few games, punted 3 times for a 41-yard average. Again, 2 of those 3 downed inside the 20. Pretty good. Not too shabby at all.
Yeah.
But to compete with... Go ahead, Bill. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was agreeing with you. And then, while I have this brief interruption, yes, Coles had him as the number 1 punter in the country, a 5-star punter recruit. Also has the number 8 kicker in the country, a 5-star kicker recruit, and he was the number 4 punter in his class by 24/7.
Yeah, so the dude can punt, no doubt about it. But to compete with him, they used a scholarship and they brought in FAU transfer Riley Thompson, who I want to get out in front of this. It is going to be mentioned that he was a freshman All-American last year. He is a senior now this year. He skips his sophomore and junior year because he is Australian. His eligibility is weird. Do not ask me to explain it. I just know he's a one-year guy that they have. But he punted down at FAU in Boca Raton 61 times for an average of 45.4, so a bit better than Barney and Moore, and 26 of his punts were downed inside the 20. So a pretty similar clip of downing opponents inside the 20 for Riley Thompson. I feel good about both of these guys. I don't know if I feel great about punters splitting reps. Like I've never seen it. I don't know if it would work, but I feel okay. I feel pretty good about either one of these two guys going in there and winning the job and being productive. Where do you fall on this, Bill?
Yeah, so much of this is also the guys you're going to have on your coverage team. As long as these guys aren't out kicking their coverage consistently, as long as, they're getting the ball off their foot quickly, they're not, taking and out, getting the ball kind of wasting time back to their catch and just get it out off of your foot, let your coverage team get down there, don't put them in an untenable situation. Like, they're going to be fine. I think a little bit of a difference between Felkins and Thompson is that Thompson has, like you mentioned, the Athletic, College Football News put him on their freshman All-American teams. Honorable mention, All Conference USA, 3rd team All Conference USA by PFF. Like, he has a little bit more of a pedigree in FBS. So I think that having him, having him as maybe the more safe option is fine. But with a guy like Paqueta, has a big booming leg, has that kind of blue chip pedigree. Again, whatever guy can be a little bit more consistent, I would much rather you have one guy who's consistently kicking the football 45 yards and they're not allowing big returns as a result of it, as opposed to the guy from San Diego State, however many years ago, where he would just kick the ball as hard as he could and whatever happened. Like, I'd much rather have someone who is consistently doing the thing that they need him to do than kick a ball 55 yards, the next one comes off your foot wrong and you kick it 30, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's where I think Thompson's going to win this job. I think you used a scholarship on the guy. I think that the staff believes he can give them maybe not the best ball, but the most consistent punting, which is, I think, what everybody's chasing. You want to minimize risks, especially in the new rules in college football allow for, I think it's like 6 fewer plays a game. So there's 6 fewer opportunities to go out there and change the course of a game. So you need to be confident in the opportunities you get. And that's where I think Riley Thompson steps in. So put me down for the Aussie to be Penn State's lead punter. I think it'd be great if he can go out there and perform. If he's Barney Amore, like the whole Barney Amore
Yeah.
experience, I think that's a positive. I think we'll be really happy with that. I think Malik Mega was a phenomenal punt cover guy last year.
Yeah, he did a great
Daquan
job.
Daquan Hardy did a great job of that too. Keaton Ellis gets involved. I think there's enough guys back who have done this now enough times to where they're going to be okay. Like if the ball sails over somebody's head, there's going to be somebody down there who can make sure it stays in the field of play. So I feel overall better about the punting unit than I do the kicking unit, Bill. I think I'm aligned with you, and I just don't want to
Agreed.
repeat of like the era right before Blake Gillikin, where it was just brutal, and we saw what a good punting team, what a good punting unit could really do. It can change a game, especially for this kind of defense. So I'm confident in the unit to go out there and be productive. And Bill, you know what else I'm confident in?
Does this have to do with home field apparel?
It does. I am confident in the quality and the what's even the best word here? The quality and the coziness of home field apparel clothing. If you did not know, Home Field Apparel is our podcast sponsor, and they make some of the coolest collegiate apparel on the internet and in the marketplace today. They have crew necks, t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, joggers. I have a pair of Penn State joggers. I have more than a couple t-shirts. I have more than a few crew necks. And I am always so excited when I'm out there at a bar for a Penn State game and I see somebody else in home field apparel gear. I cannot wait to see all of the home field shirts out walking around Chicago this upcoming fall. And for our listeners, they can get 15% off their first order with promo code RLR23 at checkout. That's all caps, all one word. If you're not a Penn State fan, if you're, I don't know, a weird Ohio State fan and you've stumbled upon a special teams preview, first of all, welcome, like, and subscribe. Second of all, they have Ohio State gear. So be sure to go out there and rep your favorite team. And we prefer if that team is Penn State. But again, it's 15% off your first order with promo code RLR23. Take it to home field. And Bill, let's talk return game. Do you want to start kick return or punt return?
It's funny because I think both of them are pretty like easy to talk about. So whichever one you want to start with.
Punt return was less fun. Punt return, I think, was capital B bad last year. There were no opportunities. And it wasn't like the thing where it was Jesse Della Valle. No, oh my God. Greg Garrity is who I'm thinking of. Just fair catching every single punt. Like, there were athletes back there. No disrespect to Greg Garrity. But there was like Parker Washington. There were legitimate Division I, next level NFL guys back there returning punts, and they couldn't get anything going. Maybe they were just a little bit conservative just by nature of how James Franklin and Stacey Collins wanted to call it. But Bill, I'm not really expecting much from the punt return game this year, especially with Parker Washington gone. Where do you fall on this?
For one, I think you need to tip your hat to the other team. I mean, Penn State in total last season had 24 punt returns. Ohio State last season, 11, 12, 13, they had 15 punt returns. I think might have 16 tied in there. Like, punt returning, it's not about your team. Like, so much of it is dependent on the other team, their ability to punt the ball down the field. Your ability to potentially get to a punter quickly can make it harder for you to return the football, because if they're not punting the ball as far, that's less distance the other team's gunners have to end up covering. Next thing you know, you're fielding it, you're immediately being swarmed by guys. You have to do a fair catch or whatever. So, like, I don't care too terribly much about punt returning. Like, I would love it if Penn State could have someone who could break a long one. Mm-hmm. But if Penn State's guys who are trying to block the punt are getting them so quick that it's speeding them up and it's making the punts worse, and as a result, they're getting fewer opportunities to return it, I'm fine with that, because that means it's probably increasing the likelihood that Penn State's going to get home a couple of times during the season. So Parker Washington averaging 5.5 yards per return. Emeka Egbuka for Ohio State averaged 6.8 yards per return last season. I'm not too terribly concerned about this one way or the other. Like I don't expect this to ever be, Matt, a consistent form of offense for Penn State, I would essentially say.
Which I think is good. Like it is totally fine to not have this dominant punt return unit because nobody really does. Real quick, names I think being thrown around in that room right now are the big two are Daquan Hardy, who is well known as a prolific returner from his high school days, and Caden Saunders. And I'd love to see Caden Saunders back there, athletic
Same.
kid, very fluid, natural athlete. I think he's fighting for a role in that two deep in the receiver room, and I think this could be a great way for him to build some confidence if he can go out there and make a couple plays as a punt returner. So I'm going to go with Caden Saunders to win this job, just because I think Hardy's also very important as Penn State's nickel corner. So I'm gonna stick with Caden Saunders as my pick for that one. Bill, do you have a take on this?
I would like this to be a place where Penn State's Penn State's guys who could really use an opportunity to just get the ball in their hands and see what happens. I like it if you mentioned Caden Saunders, and I think that's a really good example of a guy who I'd like to see in this situation. Like I'm looking now to see if Dante Cephas ever did any. Yeah, it doesn't look like he did any
He
returning at
never
Penn
did.
State, but but if a guy like Dante Cephas, if they went, hey, we think this is a way for Dante, just to get you a little bit more involved and incorporated as you're coming up to speed.
Hmm.
I like it for that. I don't necessarily want to see Keandre Lambert Smith or Trey Wallace or a guy who's a little more established back there. But if it's a way for, again, this also I think would apply for kick returns. If it's a way to get a guy who could use a path to playing time, a little bit more playing time, I like that. So, Saunders is the guy who my mind immediately went to as well.
And then kick return. Let's be honest, kick return isn't nearly as important as it was a decade ago. The new rules make it to where you get it at the 25, and even if you field it within the 25, if you fair catch it, you get it at the 25. Like, this is not a consistent way to score points. But with that being said, Nick Singleton did find the end zone last year with this. Very few returns. It feels like Stacey Collins trusts his guys to know what to look for when they're going to return a kick. Bill, do you feel comfortable with Nick Singleton being the guy again, knowing what we know now?
Obviously, I want Nick Singleton getting the football with a 25-yard head start and a bunch of blockers.
The injury
Like,
concern doesn't worry you on this?
well, you can't get concerned playing running back, and you can't get injured playing running back. So I certainly have no concerns at all. But yeah, I think it's kind of. I know people who hold this belief. I think it's ridiculous. It's
I'm with you.
football.
I don't buy this. I don't buy that at all. Yeah.
It's football. Injuries are going to happen. I want Nick Singleton to have as many opportunities to impact a football game as he can. What I'll basically say is this: if in 2017 the coaching staff was so unconcerned about Saquon Barkley picking up an injury returning kicks that they put him back there as a kick returner, there is no point in you being worried about it. I'm not going to knock on wood because there are dogs that would start barking, but knock on wood, if Nick Singleton won't get hurt returning a kick, if he does, that happens. It sucks. It happens. I truly am not concerned about it. If they want to put Nick Singleton back there, I'm going to be really happy to watch Nick Singleton return kicks this year.
I'm with you. And again, the good thing is it feels like they don't have to force anything. Like, it feels
Yeah.
like Collins and that unit know they look, I think, for looks more than they look for anything else. So if they don't see what they want to see when that ball is getting booted off, they won't take it out, and they know when to and when not to. So, Bill, that's really about all I have. We can't really end it in the traditional sense of who's your breakout guy from this unit, blah blah blah. But Bill, let's break it down. Punting, better or worse this year compared to last year?
I'll probably say worse, but so much of that is because of the uncertainty of it's the uncertainty of what these guys are at this level, not banking on projecting them out what they can be like. We just don't know right now what Riley Thompson, what Alex Paqueta are going to be at this level yet, and we can't know until the game starts. So, like, odds are the answer, odds are wrong all the time. Odds are the answer is going to be no, but it could end up being, like, who knows? Maybe we're going to be a month into the season talking about Alex Paqueta as the best punter in college football.
Kicker, Bill, better or worse?
Worse.
I'm with
Considerably worse.
Yeah. We're going to miss Jake Pinniger. No doubt about it. Punt return, better or worse?
Just going off of everything I said about punt returning, I will say exactly the same.
And then kick return, better or worse?
Kick return, I'll say better. If you're going to throw Nick Singleton back there again with another year with a full year of college experience under his belt, good luck.
And then one last one, just for fun. Over under 0.5 return touchdowns. These can be kick or punt.
I'll say under, just because it's so hard to return kicks. Like, there was one. Let's go through this. There was one last year, 0 the year before that, 2 the year before that between Jahan Dotson and Lamont Wade. 2019, they returned 0. 2018, they returned 1. And then 2017, Saquon obviously had 2, and DeAndre Thompson 1. So odds are it's going to be under. I hope I'm wrong.
I'm gonna say over. I think too many playmakers.
Sure.
I'm gonna say someone's gonna try to get cute. Just against this team for some reason. I think it's gonna lead to a return touchdown for Penn State in some shape or fashion. Bill, that's all I have. Thank you so much for joining me. This wraps up our 2 weeks of daily shows and our position previews. Overall, Bill, I think this team is in really good shape. I think this was the podcast I was least excited to do because of all the question marks. But coming out of it and, talking through it, I feel slightly better about the unit, but I still think special teams are the biggest question mark as a whole. I think this is the weakest unit. And if you're going into, your first game of the year with your biggest question mark being your kicker and your punter, you're probably in pretty good shape. So a lot to be excited.
I think there's a
You're
hair
say
of
wide
truth
receivers.
to that. I think there's a hair of truth to that statement.
Okay.
But also, if they're lining up for a field goal, and it is 30-28 West Virginia, and they're lining up for a 45-yard field goal to win the game with 2 seconds left, you're not going to be happy that the weakest unit on the team is special teams.
That's fair. But also, if they're at that point, then I think we found weaknesses elsewhere that we didn't see coming. I think is fair to say. But that's a podcast for the very, very near future. Bill, anything else you want to add on special teams, just generally, as we send the folks off into their weekend?
Boring consistency is the best thing you can get out of special teams, and I hope they get boring consistency.
Boring consistency.
If your special teams are exciting for a reason other than you have Jordan Stout on your team, that's not good usually.
In a perfect world, you would be fine with them cutting to commercial during special teams to help shorten the run of game times if it was up to me. And hopefully this will not be a problem, and the Penn State special teams rolls off without a hitch, much like these past 2 weeks of podcasts have been. Bill, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to our listeners for taking the time to listen with us these past 2 weeks. If you didn't subscribe yet, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you can. If you have a question, pop it in there. We'll be sure to answer it on the next podcast we record. Be sure to follow us over there on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button and the like button. We love interacting with you guys down there in the comments. If you're on Twitter, be sure to follow us over at RLRblog. And of course, thank you to our friends at Homefield. Be sure to use promo code RLR23 for 15% off your first order. And for my co-host, Bill DeFilippo, I'm Matt Flipovitz. Take care, everyone, and go State.